The rooftop restaurant in Phoenix shimmered like a celebration built for someone else's dream. String lights stretched overhead. A soft jazz trio played near the bar. Champagne glasses caught the glow of the city skyline. It was elegant, intentional, expensive, and it wasn't for me. I arrived straight from a solar install across town. Dust still clinging to my boots, hair pulled back, blazer thrown over my work shirt to make myself look slightly less like I'd just been on a roof all day. My brother Ethan stood at the center of it all, glowing, laughing, receiving handshakes like he had already made it. My parents hovered near him, proud in a way that was almost theatrical. My mom adjusted his collar twice. My dad clapped him on the shoulder like he'd just closed a major acquisition. I knew the tone before anyone said it out loud. This wasn't dinner. This was an announcement. Ethan tapped his glass. The jazz softened. I just want to thank everyone for believing in me, he said, grinning. The lounge is going to change downtown nightlife. Applause. Real applause. Clap too. Of course I did. That's what I've always done. I slipped into the hallway near the restrooms halfway through the evening, just to breathe. The music was loud, the laughter louder. I needed quiet. That's when I heard them. My parents. Voices low. Urgent. Excited. We pulled 410 from retirement, my dad said. And opened the equity line, my mom added quickly. It's a risk, but he's our best shot. A pause. Natalie will be fine, my dad said. She always is. And her little business. My mom continued, dismissive in a way that felt almost automatic. She doesn't need us the same way. Her little business. The one I built from scratch. The one that paid my mortgage. The one that kept me working double shifts in 100-degree heat, while Ethan tested cocktail menus. I stood there, staring at the wall, and something clicked into place. It wasn't oversight. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was prioritization. Intentional. Deliberate. I wasn't overlooked. I was deprioritized. In their story, Ethan was the gamble. I was the safety net. He was potential. I was stability. And stability doesn't get funded. Gets relied on. When I walked back out to the rooftop, I smiled. I hugged Ethan. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it in the way older sisters sometimes do. Proud of the effort, even if the structure feels shaky. I took photos. Clinked glasses. Let my mom pull me into a group picture where Ethan stood in the center and I stood slightly off to the side. I swallowed it. Every word. Every realization. Every quiet understanding that their belief had conditions. They believed in him because he needed saving. They believed in me because I didn't. Conditional love disguised as confidence. The investment wasn't small. $410,000 from retirement. An equity line against the house. Everything positioned behind his lounge concept. Custom lighting, imported tiles, a rooftop patio of his own. My business had grown organically, panel by panel, contract by contract. I reinvested profits. I built slowly. No champagne dinners. No applause. Just invoices and grit. But that night made something painfully clear. They didn't see my independence as something worth investing in. They saw it as something convenient. Later, as the evening wound down and the skyline glowed against the desert night, my dad wrapped an arm around Ethan and said, loud enough for the table to hear, "This is what vision looks like." I felt that sentence land somewhere deep, because what I heard wasn't praise. It was contrast. Driving home, the city lights blurred slightly through my windshield. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was recalibrating. There's a specific kind of ache that comes from realizing your strength has become the excuse for your exclusion. They trusted me to survive without help. They trusted him to collapse without it. And they chose accordingly. That night they chose their investment. They chose their gamble. They chose their narrative. I chose silence. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's data collection. It's watching the pattern unfold without interrupting it. It's letting people show you exactly who they believe is worth the risk. A year later, when the lounge's neon sign flickered over an empty dance floor, when contractors went unpaid, when investors stopped returning calls, they didn't question the decision. They didn't question the risk. They didn't question the conditioning that told Ethan he deserved unlimited backing. They questioned me. Because when the gamble failed, They didn't choose accountability. They chose a scapegoat. The courthouse wasn't grand. No sweeping marble staircase. No dramatic architecture. Just a small county building in Phoenix. Fluorescent lights. Beige walls. Hard wooden benches that creaked when people shifted too much. It smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. This was where my parents chose to bring our family conflict. Into a room with the judge. Into public record. They sat at the plaintiff's table like victims. My mother clutched a tissue before anything had even started. My father kept his jaw tight, eyes forward, posture stiff. Like this was something being done to them. Ethan sat between them. Not confident. Not glowing like the rooftop night a year earlier. Just tense. Their attorney stood first. He didn't attack. He implied. She forgot who raised her, he said, pacing slightly. She leveraged family goodwill while privately building assets. She siphoned opportunity. She undermined her brother's investment through aggressive business positioning. I blinked once. Siphoned opportunity? Aggressive positioning? They had turned my independence into a weapon. Then came the social media screenshots. My Instagram post projected onto a courtroom screen. The day I closed on my house. The caption, hard work compounds. A photo of solar panels against a sunset. The caption built, not given. They framed it as mockery, as humiliation, as evidence that my success had emotionally damaged my brother. My mortgage photo became provocation. My growth became interference. My stability became threat. Daniel Reed didn't move while they performed. He took notes. Calm. Unrushed. Unimpressed. When it was our turn, he didn't start with emotion. He started with math. Your Honor, he said evenly, this case hinges on one idea, that Ms. Brooks financially harmed her brother by existing successfully. A slight pause. Let's look at facts. Brick by brick, he dismantled their narrative. Separate lender for my home. Separate bank accounts. Zero parental transfers. Tax returns entered into record. Business filings dated years before Ethan's lounge concept even existed. The $410,000 retirement withdrawal timeline. Clear. Documented. Voluntary. He didn't argue loudly. He didn't defend passionately. He presented. And facts don't need volume. Then came witnesses. My former landlord. Ethan had missed 3 months of rent before the lounge even opened. Late fees waived twice. Warnings issued. A contractor testified next. Ballooning renovation costs. Design changes mid-project. Invoices unpaid. Requested upgrades beyond budget. Then emails. 6 months of correspondence proving I had pursued my apartment solar contract long before Ethan had even signed his lease. No overlap. No sabotage. Just parallel timelines. Reality. When Ethan took the stand, the room shifted. He looked smaller up there. Less like a visionary. More like someone caught between expectation and exposure. Daniel approached gently. Did Ms. Brooks ever advise investors against your lounge? No. Did she contact your contractors? No. Did she interfere with your permits? No. Each answer chipped something away. Then Daniel asked the question that changed everything. Did you ever tell your parents it wasn't fair to deny her financial support while giving you $410,000? Silence. Not confusion. Not anger. Silence. Ethan looked at my parents, then at the table, then back at Daniel. No, he said quietly. And in that single word, the case shifted. For the first time, I stopped seeing him as competition. Stopped seeing him as the golden child. I saw him as what he actually was. A product. Conditioned to believe that my success reduced his value. Taught that love was rescue. That support was entitlement. That if he struggled, someone else should compensate. He didn't just expect backing. He expected balance to be corrected in his favor. Because that's what he'd been shown. Their attorney tried to recover. He argued emotional distress. Family expectation. Implied duty. But implied duty isn't law. And emotional disappointment isn't tortious interference. Daniel closed simply. Ms. Brooks built her business independently. She purchased her home independently. She has no legal obligation to sacrifice her assets to offset her brother's failed investment. No flourish. No drama. Just clarity. I sat there the entire time with my hands folded, not shaking, not triumphant, just steady. Something inside me had shifted. This wasn't about proving I was capable anymore. It wasn't about winning. It was about refusing to accept a rewritten version of reality. Because that's what this lawsuit had always been. An attempt to make their choice feel rational. To convert their gamble into my liability. To make my independence the reason their investment collapsed. But the numbers didn't lie. And the timeline didn't bend. The judge adjusted his glasses and began speaking. Measured. Careful. Direct. He referenced lack of evidence. Clear financial separation. Failure to demonstrate interference. He mentioned something else too. Parental generosity toward one adult child does not create legal entitlement to another's assets. The courtroom felt still. My mother's tissue finally crumpled in her hand. My father stared forward. Ethan didn't look up. The judge continued. This court does not exist to redistribute outcomes based on emotional disappointment. And in that moment I realized something important. They hadn't brought me to court because they believed I owed them money. They brought me because they couldn't tolerate the imbalance their own choices created. But imbalance isn't injustice. And strength isn't theft. The judge paused. Then he began the ruling. And for the first time in a year, I exhaled. 1 year later, the neon sign flickered. That's how I knew it was over. Not from a phone call. Not from a dramatic confession. From a broken pink light buzzing above an empty doorway in downtown Phoenix. The lounge that was supposed to change nightlife looked tired. The windows were dark. A handwritten notice was taped inside the glass. Closed until further notice. I stood across the street for a moment, hard hat still in my truck, hands resting on the steering wheel. The rooftop announcement felt like it had happened in another lifetime. $410,000. Retirement drained. Equity pulled. Vision applauded. Now. Contractors unpaid. Investors gone. Music replaced by silence. And somehow, I already knew how this story was going to turn. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fryer grease. That's where Ethan asked to meet. Not the rooftop. Not anywhere aspirational. Just a cracked vinyl booth near the window, mid-afternoon light exposing everything he didn't want to say. He looked different. Thinner. Agitated. His knee bounced under the table like it couldn't find stillness. They pulled out, he said immediately. Who did? I asked. Everyone. He ran a hand through his hair. Investors. Suppliers. Even the bar manager. I nodded slowly. Businesses fail. It happens. Especially when they're built on momentum instead of margins. But that wasn't what he wanted to talk about. It would have worked, he said quickly. If timing hadn't gotten messed up. Timing? I asked. He leaned forward. That apartment solar contract you got? The one with the East Valley development. I blinked. What about it? That was my crowd, he said. Those investors were looking at that property. When you locked in the sustainability angle, it shifted their focus. It changed the energy. Changed the energy. I stared at him. You think my solar contract collapsed your lounge? I'm saying, he pressed. You move fast. You always have. And sometimes that affects other people. There it was. Not accountability. Not mismanagement. Me. I drove home after that conversation with something heavy settling into place. This wasn't just financial failure. It was narrative protection. If his lounge failed because of market conditions, poor budgeting, or unrealistic projections, that meant he gambled badly. But if it failed because I moved fast, because I shifted energy, because I succeeded, then he wasn't reckless. He was robbed. And I had done the robbing. The family meeting happened 2 days later. My parents' dining room. Same polished table. Same framed photos lining the walls. Except now the energy was tight. Controlled. Serious. My father spoke first. Your brother is in a difficult position. I said nothing. My mother folded her hands like she was negotiating a truce. We're not blaming you, she began, which is always how blame begins. But you've done well, she continued. You have equity. You have momentum. Maybe there's a way to balance things. Balance. That word again. What does that mean? I asked carefully. Alone, my dad said quickly. Or partial equity in your business. Or maybe refinancing your house to free up liquidity. I felt my pulse slow instead of rise. You want me to leverage my home? I clarified. To offset his failed investment? It's not about failure, my mom insisted. It's about family. Family. The word stretched thin. Flashbacks don't arrive with warning. They slide in quietly. Don't celebrate too loud. My mother whispering when I got a scholarship in high school. Let him have something. My dad saying after Ethan lost a regional competition. Tone it down. When I landed my first major contract. I used to think those comments were about kindness. Now I understood. They weren't protecting his feelings. They were managing his fragility. Conditioning him to believe that my success needed to shrink so his wouldn't feel small. Back at the table, my father leaned forward. You're strong, he said. You always land on your feet. There it was again. My resilience used as justification. You gave him $410,000, I said evenly. That was different, my mother replied. How? Silence. Because the honest answer was simple. It was different because he needed saving. And I didn't. They weren't asking for partnership. They were asking for compensation. Not because I caused the collapse, but because I survived it. That's when the emotional shift became undeniable. They hadn't just favored him financially. They had built a belief system around him. One where my growth equaled his loss. Where opportunity was a limited resource inside our family. Where if I expanded, he must have been displaced. And if he fell, I must be responsible. I'm not refinancing my home, I said calmly. My mother's expression hardened slightly. So you're just going to watch him struggle? I didn't cause this. You didn't stop it either, she shot back. That sentence hung in the air. Because what she meant was, you didn't sacrifice enough. The meeting ended without resolution. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just quiet disappointment dressed up as moral superiority. 3 days later I received an email. Subject line. Family discussion next steps. But it wasn't a discussion. It was a request for financial disclosure. Asset summaries. Revenue statements. Property valuation. They wanted numbers. Not for transparency. For leverage. A week after that, a certified envelope arrived at my door. I knew what it was before I opened it. Some families argue. Some families withdraw. Mine filed paperwork. Because when the gamble failed, they didn't rewrite the investment. They rewrote the story. And in their new version, I wasn't the overlooked daughter anymore. I was the reason he fell. The sedan was black. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just official. It pulled up outside my house on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was reviewing an installation proposal at my kitchen counter. I almost didn't answer the knock. But something in the rhythm of it, firm, measured, practiced, made me walk to the door. Ms. Brooks? The man asked. Yes. You've been served. He handed me the envelope like it weighed nothing. It didn't. But my hands felt heavier holding it. I stood there for a full minute before opening it. Not because I didn't know what it was, but because once you read words like that, you can't unread them. The document was clean, clinical, detached, tortious interference, emotional distress, unjust enrichment, demand for partial ownership of my home. I blinked slowly. They weren't asking anymore. They were accusing. The narrative they constructed was almost impressive. According to the complaint, my aggressive business positioning had undermined Ethan's investor relationships. My public celebration of financial success had caused him emotional harm. My independence had created instability within the family structure. And therefore legally, I owed restitution. I read that paragraph twice. It was surreal. Not because it was cruel. Because it was strategic. They weren't suing out of anger. They were suing to legitimize the story. If a court validated it, even partially, then their version of reality would win. Word spread fast. Church friends called my mother first. Then neighbors started asking polite, careful questions when they saw me outside. I heard there's some tension, one woman said gently, like this was a weather update. My parents framed it well. We're heartbroken, my mom told people. We just want fairness. Fairness. That word again. In their version, I wasn't disciplined or hardworking. I was cold, greedy, detached from family values. The daughter who forgot where she came from. I didn't forget. I just didn't mortgage myself to preserve someone else's pride. I called Daniel Reed the same afternoon. He answered on the second ring. "Take a breath," he said before I even finished explaining. His voice was steady, strategic, calm in a way that felt structural. "This isn't about feelings," he continued. "This is about burden of proof." "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "And they'll have to prove that you did." That was the pivot. Let them perform emotion. We present math. Zoe came over that night with takeout and zero judgment. She didn't say, "I can't believe they do this." She said, "What do you need?" That question matters. Because support doesn't dramatize. It stabilizes. We spread the documents across my dining table. She read silently while I stared at the wall. "They're trying to make your success a liability," she said finally. "Yes," I replied. "And if you fold? They'll call it reconciliation." The evidence collection felt almost cinematic, but quieter. Texts from my father explicitly stating they would not be financially assisting me with my house. Screenshots saved. The timeline of the $410,000 retirement transfer. Bank statements. Tax returns. Contracts showing the 6-month pursuit of my solar development deal. Every date mattered. Every timestamp. Daniel built the defense like architecture. Deliberate. Load-bearing. Unemotional. Then I found something unexpected. A journal from high school. I hadn't opened it in years. Pages filled with small, careful handwriting. "Don't celebrate too loud. Let him shine. Be the strong one." I sat on the floor reading it. This lawsuit wasn't new. It was just formalized. The conditioning had been there for years. Minimize yourself. Protect his ego. Adjust your light. Now that I refused, they escalated. The complaint wasn't really about money. It was about rewriting history. If they could prove I interfered, then Ethan didn't fail. He was sabotaged. If they could prove emotional distress, then his collapse wasn't mismanagement. It was damage inflicted. And if they could claim unjust enrichment, then my house wasn't earned. It was morally borrowed. That's what this was. Narrative litigation. The hardest part wasn't the legal language. It was the social fallout. Family friends stopped inviting me to gatherings. My aunt posted vague quotes about humility on Facebook. Someone from church left a voicemail reminding me that family unity is sacred. Unity without accountability isn't unity. It's pressure. Daniel requested financial discovery immediately. If they wanted to open the books, we would open them all. Not emotionally. Legally. "Truth is boring," he told me during one meeting. And that's good for us. He was right. Truth doesn't sparkle. It doesn't perform. It sits quietly in spreadsheets and signatures. And that's where we were strongest. The court date was set for 8 weeks later. 8 weeks of whispers. 8 weeks of silence from my parents. 8 weeks of Ethan reposting vague comments about betrayal and loyalty. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not privately. Because engagement fuels performance. And this was already a stage. One evening I stood in my living room and looked around. The house they were trying to claim partial ownership of. Every tile. Every cabinet. Every panel of solar wiring I had personally negotiated. They weren't just suing for money. They were suing for narrative control. If they won even partially, they would be able to say, "We were right about her." But if they lost, the story would collapse. The night before our first hearing, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of losing, because I understood what this meant. This wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. It was public declaration. They had chosen court over conversation, accusation over accountability. And tomorrow, a judge would decide whether their version of reality held weight, or finally, fell apart. The courtroom was quiet when the judge returned. Not tense, not dramatic, just still. The kind of stillness that comes when everyone knows something is about to shift. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded. Ethan stared at the wood grain in front of him like it might offer a different outcome if he looked long enough. Daniel sat beside me, calm as ever. No theatrics. No whispered strategy. Just a legal pad resting on his knee. The judge adjusted his glasses and began reading. Measured. Clear. Unhurried. He referenced the claims one by one. Tortious interference. Unsupported by evidence. Emotional distress. Unsubstantiated. Unjust enrichment. Legally inapplicable. Each phrase landed like a door closing. Firm. Final. Then he said the words that mattered most. This court finds no legal basis for holding Ms. Brooks financially responsible for her brother's failed business venture. My chest loosened slightly. Not triumph. Relief. He continued. Parental financial support provided voluntarily to one adult child does not create legal entitlement to another adult child's assets. There it was. Spoken plainly. Not emotional. Not moral. Legal. Then came the final blow. Claims are dismissed with prejudice, which means they cannot refile, cannot reshape, cannot try again with better wording. Done. He ordered them to pay court costs, not as punishment, as consequence. And before he concluded, he added something that wasn't required, but felt intentional. There is a distinction between rescue and love. This court will not conflate the two. Silence followed. Heavy. Real. My mother's shoulders sagged first. Not dramatically, just lower. My father stared straight ahead. Ethan finally looked up, but not at me. At the judge. Like maybe he had expected some soft landing. Some partial validation. There wasn't one. Daniel leaned slightly toward me. It's over, he said quietly. And for the first time in a year, I believed it. Walking out of the courthouse didn't feel victorious. No reporters. No applause. Just sunlight and the hum of traffic in the distance. My phone buzzed with a few texts from Zoe. One word: breathe. I did. Deep. Slow. Because what I felt wasn't excitement. It was release. The pressure to defend my existence. Gone. The pressure to justify my stability. Gone. The pressure to make myself smaller so someone else wouldn't feel inadequate. Gone. My parents didn't approach me outside. They walked to their car together. Close. Tight. Ethan lingered for a second. You happy now? He asked. Not angry. Not shouting. Just resentful. I looked at him carefully. This was never about happiness, I said. It was about boundaries. He shook his head slightly, like that answer didn't satisfy him. Maybe it never would. Because when someone is raised to believe support is guaranteed, boundaries feel like betrayal. The silence that followed was louder than the lawsuit. No calls. No holiday invitations. No group texts. For a while I waited for reconciliation. An apology. An acknowledgement. It didn't come. And slowly I stopped waiting. Low contact wasn't dramatic. It was practical. I responded when necessary. I didn't volunteer updates. I didn't seek approval. Peace replaced performance. My business expanded that year. 2 new crews. 3 major commercial contracts. I hired an operations manager so I wasn't on rooftops every single day. Growth felt different now. Not defiant. Not reactive. Just earned. I stopped posting captions that hinted at resilience. I didn't need to signal strength anymore. I just lived it. The house felt quieter too. Not lonely. Grounded. There's something powerful about knowing you kept what you built. Without apology. About a year later, Ethan texted. No preamble. I'm working at a warehouse now. A pause. Another message. Started therapy. Then one more. I see some things differently. I stared at the screen for a long time. Growth isn't instant. Awareness takes time. And pain has a way of stripping illusions. But awareness doesn't erase impact. I didn't respond. Not yet. Not because I was punishing him. Because I needed consistency before connection. Boundaries aren't revenge. They're protection. I've thought a lot about strength since all of this happened. Being strong doesn't mean absorbing damage quietly. It doesn't mean financing someone else's denial. It doesn't mean shrinking so another person can feel tall. That's not strength. That's self-erasure. Real strength is quieter. Says no without shaking. It stands firm without attacking. It allows other people to experience the natural outcome of their decisions. Even when those people share your last name. My parents haven't apologized. Maybe they will someday. Maybe they won't. But I don't measure my peace by their understanding anymore. That's the shift. For most of my life, I believed love required availability, unlimited access, unlimited sacrifice. But love without accountability becomes entitlement. And entitlement, when challenged, turns hostile. Court didn't break our family. It revealed it. Sometimes I replay the rooftop dinner in my mind. The applause. The champagne. The phrase, "You're our best shot." Back then, I thought being overlooked meant I was less valued. Now I understand something different. I wasn't overlooked. I was underestimated. And that underestimation became my insulation. Because when everything collapsed, I was still standing. Not because someone rescued me. Because I built carefully, quietly, intentionally. If there's one question I carry forward, it's this. Where are you shrinking so someone else doesn't feel small? And more importantly, what would happen if you stopped?